Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to start the podcast on a serious note, but I know we've called out some people over the last couple of episodes, and I just wanted to say that's not who we are as podcasters. That's not what we want to be in this game. Hopefully, as you listen to us, we were maturing, and we didn't realize how comfortable we were sleeping at night either before we called out some people over the last couple of weeks. But here, Jake, it's hip hop. Come on, stand on business. I don't know if I should be talking for Sam, but if you ever hear me and Sam call people out in the podcast game, in the take game, just know we mean it. We're standing on business. So, J. Cole, I get what you're doing, my guy, apologizing for the diss. But, if a UFC fighter, beat up a guy after round one and then was in the corner and, did you see this guy's face? His face is bleeding. I don't think we can keep doing this. This guy's going to get seriously hurt if we keep stopping this fight. It's the point of the fight. I get, the hip hop. It might just you're just exchanging words. It's just in the booth. It's just lyrics and bar for bar. At that point, it's not even that level. So I get what the guy's trying to do. Shout out, that's my guy. Like I said, we really enjoyed the album, and I'm not saying that if we were comparing the Big Three beef to a fight that J. Cole would be the one beating Kendrick Lamar. I'm not saying it'd be the other way either. I think it's pretty even at this point, but I thought it did seem like we were going to get an old school beef in the sense that we were going to get guys going back and forth on songs together, and apparently that's not going to happen anymore. So I don't know if we're going to get a Big Three beef from the Drake Kendrick Lamar side. Maybe they exchange some bars, but we'll see. Apparently Cole has got his chin out, ready to take his best shot, from Kendrick Lamar. But like I said, shout out, that's our guy. So the songs are definitely probably number one in the rotation as of right now, and they're definitely going to be. They'll probably keep up that way until the fall off drops. And the songs that are not on the J. Cole album that are number one in the rotation are obviously, or at least newer songs anyways, are still first person shooter mode and the other songs that he's been featured on as of late. So that's our guy. But strange move not necessarily strange move, but just for I think hip hop fans, kind of disappointing, because we wanted to see these MCs go bar for bar and see, we were really gonna. They've been going toe to toe, obviously, in the industry and in just with their careers. So the fact that they were actually going to start addressing each other and calling out each other in this way, where Kendrick had started that obviously with Control way back in the day, but up until now, we obviously hadn't gotten that. And the fact that J. Cole threw a little bit of water on the fire that past weekend was kind of a bummer. But another stacked weekend in the sports world, another stacked weekend outside of the sports world. I gotta say, this was probably the most locked in I've ever been on a lottery. But I think they said that the number was up over $1 billion for the Powerball, whatever the main jackpot was for that. And I believe it was the fourth largest. I want to say the fourth largest ever. I don't know if it was state dependent. I'm not a big lottery guy, but like I said, once the number was creeping up into historic territories, I was like, am I going to have to go just scoop up a ticket and just get involved? If it was going on one more week, I was like, maybe this is the week. And then, of course, I was looking it up the night they were doing the drawing, and I saw that it was delayed. And the minute that there was delays, I was like, uh-oh. Anytime there's a ballot count situation, there's delays, that means something is up. And of course, there was a winner for the big Powerball jackpot this weekend. So shout out to that guy. But I guess we were all winners in a sense, because we got to see. Did we all get to see the eclipse? I guess in the Midwest, a large portion of the people got to see it. Here in Iowa, the eclipse was not it didn't make the state dark at all, but if you got the eclipse glass, everybody was rocking the eclipse glasses over the weekend and looking at it. And I don't know, 7 out of 10. If you want to DM us on Rem and Sam on Instagram, the DMs are open. Slide in the DMs with your ratings of the solar eclipse if you guys saw it. It's cool, obviously, but there was a point where, it peaked, obviously, I think in Texas, where it peaked and got super dark, but the time it peaked, and then we were going to get total the part where you could look through the glasses and kind of see total coverage from where we were at in the state. And there was a point where in the downtown, because it's where I work is located downtown, and there was a point where downtown was like low key full of people filing out of the buildings trying to get down there and look at the eclipse. And like I said, 7 out of 10, it's pretty cool. I don't know if we need to be halting the economy over the eclipse, but like I said, pretty cool. So shout out to the eclipse. I think do we get an eclipse more often than a repeat college basketball champion? Because what was it, 17 years? Let's see, when is the next solar eclipse? Will we see, slide in the DMs as well too, will we see another solar eclipse or another repeat champion? 2044, so 20 years between the next solar eclipse and 17 years. That was the number I thought I saw. I'm just remembering off the top. Obviously, that Florida team with Horford, I think we mentioned that off the top as well too. So, but that Florida team from 06, 07 would have been the last team to repeat in the men's side up until this year when UConn pulls it off. But like we said, the championships are over for college. So our 1 month stand with college basketball is officially over. We're back to the NBA grind. We're running Hawks Heat in the background right now. We were going to run Bucks Celtics. And then the first play of the game was like a Giannis reverse lob, Brook Lopez raining down threes, and the Bucks were pulling away for a little bit. Let's get a live score update and see if the Celtics have worked their way back. It is the NBA in 2024. Okay, the Bucks are up by 20 at the halftime, and I think the Celtics are up by like 15 games in the season. So I can't imagine that the Celtics are too worried about this one, but I don't know. Maybe we'll have to ask Sam about. Is that a question for Sam on the next pod this weekend? Is this the most meaningless like 15 game lead that anybody's ever built in the playoff? We'll see. I think Sam, of course, obviously is pretty high on what the Celtics and Tatum could do, at least in the Eastern Conference playoffs. But Hawks Heat, some playoff implications here. We've also got a Kings Thunder game, and of course Spurs are playing the Grizzlies as well right now too. Rockets Magic would have been more fun, obviously, if the Rockets were still in playoff contention, but they've been eliminated. We now know what the play-in situation will be for the Western Conference, and it will not include Ime Udoka in the Houston Rockets. But it still looks like the Rockets are still up by 10 anyway. So it's Udoka. They're still going to be competing. We know Udoka is not going to just shut it down and start losing games because there is not playoff implications on the line. We understand what the big picture is there. We've also got the Knicks currently up on the Bulls. And is this Jazz? Oh no, this Nuggets Jazz game will start a little bit later, but we'll be keeping an eye as always on the hoops in the background. And we'll talk a little bit more big picture NBA stuff, playoff picture stuff, like we said, this weekend with Sam. So if you guys want to hear that, always, subscribe to the feeds, Rem and Sam on Spotify, Rem and Sam on Apple Podcasts, YouTube. We're on you can find all the stuff on any social platforms. It just depends on how you guys like to consume it. Do you like the reels? Listen to podcasts? Because Rem and Sam, you can get it however you want. Pause. On any platform you guys can think of. Rem and Sam podcast. We're out there. So like I said, stay tuned. We're gonna have the NBA playoffs on full coverage. But I definitely think we have to shout out South Carolina and UConn for taking the titles in their respective sides for the college basketball playoffs, March Madness, and shout out to Dawn Staley as well too, because I know we had Allie on here hyping up Dawn Staley. Obviously for well-deserved for completing the undefeated season. They were trying to debate today on First Take what was more impressive, the undefeated season from South Carolina or Dan Hurley and UConn going back-to-back on the men's side. And it's tough because it feels like, as a fan of men's college basketball, just hearing an undefeated season feels more rare. And I feel like the last fully undefeated season would it have been that Indiana team? Was that like 70s, 80s Indiana? That was the last full undefeated team. The last Indiana title was 87. Wouldn't have been that one. I think it may have been the 76 Indiana team. 32-0. And I think that might have been the last undefeated team for the men's side. But I mean, like we were talking about with UConn during that Iowa game, I mean, Gino had that 100-game run for the women's side. They won 4 consecutive national titles. So an undefeated season has definitely been completed more recently on the women's side, but you also think about the turnover that they had. I mean, he's got Brianna Stewart, his Gino for that UConn team, as his best player anyways for the entirety of the run. And I mean, Dawn Staley's had great players. Aaliyah Boston was player of the year and number 1 overall pick. And Cardoso is going to be a she's going to be like a top 5 pick and probably like a top 3 pick, honestly, with the way that she's played and the fact that, again, the South Carolina team just had the undefeated season that they had. She's definitely going to have a peak draft stock as we head into the WNBA draft season here. But they did lose, like, as noted, they did lose a bunch of starters, and the competitiveness of the women's field this year. I mean, it was the best tournament between the two tournaments. And I mean, we're recording this Tuesday night. Like we said, I think we know at this point that the number for that game was 18 million. So basically what Allie was predicting, she, was saying 20 mil on the high side. My guess is it would have peaked over that at some point. Let's see if we can pull up those official ratings for the Women's March Madness. I believe it was the highest women's basketball game of all time. And then I want to say the highest viewed basketball game period since 2019, if I read that correctly. And that's basketball game period. That is not just college basketball. That includes the NBA. So the South Carolina Iowa game just topped basically every NBA game post-COVID, if I read that correctly. If the men's, it looked like, so second half for the men's game looks like probably 14, 15 million viewers for the men's side of the bracket. But the women's championship game, 18.87 million for the women's bracket. Most watch hoops contest of any kind in 5 years. I'm reading this on the Hollywood Reporter as of right now. I mean, that number last year was an historic number at 9 million. Just to think back at where we were even 12 months ago at this point, when Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and that rivalry was just, really starting and to start to become what it's become at this point. And when we got that 9 million number, it's like, this is incredible, the trajectory that it's on, and the fact that it's not just, oh, this thing is now sustainable. It's this thing can at times be the best thing in the sport. And, I'm sure there are fans of the basketball sport that just are going to say that women's basketball is the best. I'm not saying they're wrong. Obviously, I'm agreeing that this year they were the best. And, there's going to be seasons where the men are going to have good tournaments. And there's going to be years where the NBA is on fire as well, too, for, again, just comparing it for the whole sports world. But I mean, this is clearly now, it's like, okay, this has the ability to be that kind of product in the long term for these markets. And there's some stuff as well too with the media rights deal, because the WNBA their media rights deal has been tied to the NBA media rights deal up until this point. But when they're, so those contracts will both be due at the same time here. And instead of necessarily pursuing a joint contract again, or, some kind of joint venture, I know there's talks that the WNBA would potentially move out and do their own thing. And I was seeing as well too for, just the stuff, the preparation that's going into the WNBA right now to prepare for the talent in the class that's about to join. I mean, the Caitlin Clark stuff is just insane, because I know the Aces have already, their game that they're scheduled to play against Indiana. Indiana holds the number 1 pick right now in the WNBA draft. Their game that's scheduled against them, they're already having to play that game, schedule that game in a bigger arena. I think the arena they play in right now is 10, 12K. So they're trying to find 20K to hold the Caitlin Clark game. I've seen another matchup against another team had ticket prices normally in the 20, $30 range. And now that Caitlin Clark is going to, projected to be on the Indiana team, that matchup, I think it was against the Phoenix Mercury. I think the tickets now for that matchup are starting, $100 plus again, just because Caitlin Clark is doing that. And then, like Allie was saying, it wasn't just Caitlin Clark. Dawn Staley is in her legacy and what she's done for that South Carolina team. I think like the number, if it would have been UConn, South Carolina, probably still just seeing the fact that this number blew out the men's number, I probably still would have topped the men's number. And the fact that we got the peak storylines, means we got the peak viewership as well too. But that's just crazy that it beat even a NBA game the last 5 years. You think we had like Lakers, Nuggets, intense Western Conference Finals. I know, Nuggets Heat may not be the biggest market, but Warriors Celtics a couple years ago, like that, those are two pretty high market teams. Steph was one of the 2-3 most marketable stars of his generation. So they've definitely had some things that could potentially draw big numbers, and the fact that this thing was like, okay, of this time period of basketball, this thing has really been I get the more you look at it, it's like, yeah, this is kind of the transcendent thing that's going on in the sport right now, even more so than what's going on in the NBA. And the Jokic stuff and what we're seeing with Victor Wembanyama, there's incredible stuff going on all over. UConn, we just got the first repeat champion in almost 20 years on the men's side. We've got like a real potential new Coach K figure now that Coach K is actually gone. I know Sam was trying to claim the Coach K belt in the ultimate Frisbee world, but somebody still needs to claim the next Coach K best face, who's the face of the college basketball program scene on the men's side. Somebody needs to still grab that belt. And it seems like Dan Hurley is on his way to do it after winning back-to-back. So again, back to the women, just shout out to Caitlin Clark, shout out to Dawn Staley for really bringing the sport into a whole nother limelight. I know Dawn Staley was giving Caitlin Clark her proper credit as well too after the game and thanking her for what she's done. And again, I know Iowa ultimately didn't get the championship, and there was still a couple moments there where South Carolina, they were pretty dominant throughout the game. They were obviously the better team, but there was a couple moments where Iowa was starting to hit threes again, and it's like, okay, if Caitlin Clark gets cooking and if this thing gets going again, there maybe is a chance that they could sneak this one out. But Dawn Staley, and was it Tessa Johnson? Was that the freshman that had like her career high in scoring during the national championship game? They just hit some big shots to close that one out. But this was probably this was the best Iowa team period that, in my lifetime, definitely. And I want to say, I know there's like, Hayden, going back to like Hayden Fry on the football side, even more recently too, like the CJ Beathard teams and that Rose Bowl team. I know the Christian McCaffrey Rose Bowl, the Iowa fans are not going to like me bringing that one up, but that was a good team. They've been competitive in the Big Ten and been competitive for Big Ten titles as well too, with the structure, the way the divisions have set up and the way they've been able to kind of sneak their way into that game, even though they haven't had to necessarily be the best team all the time. But yeah, that 2015 team finished 5th in the college football poll. They finished 9th in the final AP poll. Some top 10 finishes, early 2000s in the Kurt Ferentz years. What was the best Hayden Fry? The best Hayden Fry finish was number 10 in the AP poll. Was that a Rose Bowl team that year? Holiday Bowl. Tied in the Holiday Bowl versus Brigham Young. I didn't know you could tie in a bowl game. I thought I guess they're like, no, we don't need, it doesn't even matter. We don't even need a winner for this one. We've already collected the money that we need to collect. But, and then, then if you go way back to that 58 team that won the national title, Forrest Evanshevsky. Shout out to our guy, Coach Forrest. Sorry for butchering your name into the Ovechkensky family, my apologies. But, definitely a stud for winning the national title at Iowa. Let's see if there's any early. I don't know if there's any early on basketball titles for the Iowa team. I don't know if there's a early women's basketball title as well, too. We can give it a quick check. 3 Final Four appearances for the Iowa men's, 8 conference championships, regular season, 3 tournament wins, but no NCAA championship wins. I was going to say that fact checks as correct as I would remember it. And for the women's, no championships for the women's either. So I guess if we're not including the wrestling championships, because the wrestling thing maybe puts Iowa into a category with all these other powerhouse schools as well too. I know they're I know we're a competitive state. I guess I don't know if it bears out into the actual championships rings as well. IT, see if you can look up the Iowa wrestling championship numbers real quick too. But outside of the wrestling team, I mean, Caitlin Clark is basically the best thing that's happened to Iowa. Honestly, probably the state in the last couple of years. I know we got I think the Chat GPT data center is here in Iowa somewhere. I don't know if that's secret information, but Ballmer did say that in an interview. I think he said that on Podcast P. So if Ballmer said it, I think IT can double check, but I think we're clear to drop that information as well too. And I think Iowa is kind of going to become the Midwest in general is going to kind of become a spot for that kind of thing. So outside of but even still, I think Caitlin Clark might have boosted the economy more than the Chat GPT data center has, because it's not like I've seen any Chat GPT skyscrapers going up around the state at all. But shout out to the women's side. Shout out to UConn, who definitely proved me wrong, because when we were filling out the bracket at the top, I just was assuming, again, looking at the history, it's been 20 years. I wasn't really, I was a young kid when that Florida team was around. So it's not like I have great memories of watching that run. So I've never really seen a team go back to back. I've never really seen what that looks like. I don't know if we have to pause that or not. So pause going back to back, but it seemed like historically it'd be really hard to do. And again, they were kind of like South Carolina, where they had some turnover on the roster as well too. I know Klingon is it Klingon how you say it? I don't want to call him like he's like a Star Trek character. And I don't even know if I'm saying the Star Trek. Is it Klingon for Star Trek? I don't know if we need to get bogged down in pronouncing the Star Trek things correctly to appease the Star Trek fans. I don't even know if the Star Trek fans are our audience, but if there is like a Star Trek nickname for Klingon, can we call him Spock? Dr. Spock? Is there like a Donovan Star Trek pun name that we can think of? Is Star Trek on Paramount Plus? We might have to, rip through the Star Trek seasons real quick and see if we can come up with a name for our guy Klingon. But I mean, Hurley now, like we said, is probably has the belt. I mean, they, for that face of the best program on the men's side for college basketball. I think it's, he's getting his fair share as the best coach right now to be doing it in the game. And this was probably the most well-coached team, again, that I'll say that I've ever seen. And again, that's not like a huge span of basketball history, but again, I'm not even calling Dan Hurley the best coach that I've ever seen. And he's up there with what he was able to pull off with doing this back-to-back run. But just the way this team was able to execute in the second halves and their ability to lock in on defense, and being a well-coached team, it is on the coach to put together a good game plan, but it is also on the players to go out and execute that game plan. And whatever the combination is for Dan Hurley and the players for this UConn team. Again, I didn't watch college basketball in the regular season this year, so obviously saying that UConn was not capable of pulling off the repeat title was the wrong. If I had actually watched how this team was able to execute throughout the season, I probably, and like a lot of other smart basketball people that picked it, probably would have seen that the obvious choice would have been the right one. And just the margin of victory as well, too, for the title runs. I think it was they've won every tournament game the last 2 years by 14 points, which is just crazy. So let's check that Florida team quickly and see what they did, because kind of like that Florida team. I mean, UConn entered this season as the number one in the bracket, but last season, I think they were a 4 seed going into the tournament. Top 20 team, good team, but not like one of the quote unquote powerhouse schools of the year that year. And that's when that Florida team repeated in 06-07, the first year they were kind of like that. And then, or I guess no, they were what were they seeded in? They were a 3 seed the first year. And then, defending champions, Al Horford, Joakim Noah return. They were a 1 seed and cruised to the national championship the next year. But their first year, I can't do math quickly, but it does look like double-digit wins in all of the games except for the Sweet 16 against number 7 Georgetown in the first season. They won, or the first year of the back-to-back, they won by 4 points. That was Jeff Green, Roy Hibbert. Okay, so, a couple of NBA guys. Jeff Green, Roy Hibbert, Al Horford, Joakim Noah battling it out on a college court. I should have been more locked in as a 6-year-old back then, trying to watch these games. But one close one there against Georgetown, and then in the second year of the repeat, put up 112 on Jackson State in the first round. I don't think Dion was there coaching quite yet. And then more double digits, a 10-point win in the Final Four against UCLA, and a 9-point win against Ohio State, the Greg Oden Ohio State. Was that Conley as well, too? Oden, Conley, Daquan Cook. Shout out Ron Lewis making a run to the national championship. And then that 10-point win, over UCLA. And Aaron Afwalo, Darren Collinson, Luke Mbah-a-Moute. Luke Richard Mbah-a-Moute? I didn't know there was another name in there for Luke Mbah-a-Moute. And he was there for that Westbrook team as well, too. That Westbrook, Kevin Love, Darren Collinson team. Yeah, Luke Mbah-a-Moute, Josh Shipp, when they made a run to the Final Four. But yeah, they lost to Coach Calipari's Memphis. Oh, I know Coach Calipari has been in the news lately, and I guess, Dan Hurley and Coach Calipari kind of connected as well, too, because a lot of people are wondering if Dan Hurley will be taking over for Coach Calipari at the University of Kentucky. And at the time of we're recording this, or I guess let me fact check this live. Earlier this afternoon, when I was looking at Dan Hurley on Wikipedia, it said he was Dan S. Hurley, Dan S. Hurley, very official, an American basketball coach who is the head coach of the University of Kentucky. But it is now changed. So at the time that we're recording this, it is changed back to the University of Connecticut. And even the links, you get the links that are connected to the Wikipedia stuff. And not that Wikipedia is obviously the main source, but the link that was there when it was University of Kentucky was still the old one announcing his departure from Rhode Island when he was leaving Rhode Island to go to UConn. So it was not like it was tied to any rumors or anything. It was obviously just somebody messing around. But there was a split second where it was like, okay, there are rumblings going around. And like we're saying, Hurley now has the belt as the best coach in college basketball. And Greenberg on First Take today was saying that Kentucky could offer Dan Hurley about $10 million, and the most UConn could offer him would be about 7.5. And I don't know how he's getting to those numbers. I'm sure he's right. And just thinking about too, Kentucky has a bigger football program. Maybe they're able to supplement more income that way. They're in the SEC, and UConn doesn't necessarily have that other stream, though the basketball program might be more dominant. So, it could make sense that Kentucky could get to a higher number. But I mean, even if he gets even the $7.5 million is a raise from where he is at right now, but it is still quite a bit down from $10 million. And $10 million is almost double what he is at right now. So he is at $5.5 million base salary. And then there's an incentives right now. Last year, he signed an extension after winning the title, a 6-year, $33 million extension. So after one title run last year, I mean, he's $5.5 million. And at that point, Coach Cal is, I think, the highest paid coach in college basketball at $8 million. And I think his Arkansas contract is rumor, or I guess his alleged Arkansas contract. I don't know if that's quite official yet, but his alleged Arkansas contract is rumored to be similar to that. So I don't think it's going to drop him down in terms of his ranking on the list for highest paid head coaches. But Hurley, after one national title, was worth 5.5. And now after a second one, he's going to be potentially worth 10 at the University of Kentucky. If that's what, if Greenberg is throwing out a credible number there. So you're telling me his value's almost doubled. So I get there is there's culture stuff, obviously, with UConn there. I think his, Greenberg was saying that was his quote unquote dream job, and that he had other offers, and, that he has made an effort to be at UConn. But I mean, at some point, the bag is the bag. It just is what it is. And I mean, it's not like Kentucky. It's not like I don't think people would consider it maybe it would be a little bit of a downgrade with just the way, Kentucky and the Calipari thing has ended here. But it wouldn't be to take that kind of a raise to go to the university. I mean, very, very understandable. And like we're saying, Calipari right now is already at like $8 million. And I'm guessing, just inflation and economy, I'm guessing that is like a record for the most money ever made by a college basketball coach, or at least close to it. So, I mean, $10 million for a college basketball coach. I mean, outside of maybe Coach K was like 12 million or something like that. Plus, shady stocks under the tables and, I don't special vitamins to make him live forever. I'm sure there's other stuff worth I'm sure they made him worth like $1 billion in that Duke deal. I'm sure there's insider trading that he's able to get involved in. And, I'm sure there's perks to being the Duke head coach and being Coach K and team coach of Team USA as well, too. But I mean, $10 million is going to have to be like, if that is actually correct, it's going to be hard for Hurley to turn down. So the UConn fans better really hope that this is actually like his dream job. And I'm sure that UConn is going to, relook at his contract again and definitely take care of him and do everything it takes to keep him around. But it is kind of interesting that, the UConn thing is not just Hurley the last, it's not even, the last several years. We're talking big picture here now, the last 30 years. Because, I mean, this is UConn's now 6 titles since 94. So I think that's, obviously 30 years. Let me see when that first actual title was. But yeah, they got those first 3 with Calhoun. And then the second one, or the fourth one with their second coach, Kevin Ollie. And now they've gotten their last 2 with Dan Hurley. And there's really now, 99 would have been, the first title. But if I guess to round up the last 30 years, the stat was floating around was last 30 years, but 99, is that like 25, 26 years? So, 6 titles in the last 26 years for UConn. Duke is at 1, 2, 3 in that time span, and then the back-to-back in 92, 91. So that still puts them at 4 and 5, still less than UConn. Kentucky is at 3. Kansas is at 2. UNC is at 3 as well. 4 if we want to include 93. Again, this is just like since the 90s for these blue blood schools. UCLA with 1, and that's their 1 title as well too, post John Wooden. So I mean, they definitely have emerged as the main basketball school. And if you, with what Greenberg was saying as well too, which is a good point, if you include the women's side, it's like incredibly dominant, all the titles that they've had. I mean, Gino's 11 titles in this span as well too. It's kind of untouchable if we're just looking at basketball, that they've emerged this way. But the fact that they've had that coaching changeover, it has kind of, I think that has been the one thing that has kept them a little bit back a tier from those other blue blood schools. I think even Kentucky, just from a name brand standpoint, the last up until I would say this season, still would have been, I think, to the general public, a better basketball school. Just like if you were asking a random person on the street, the history, just all the history at UCLA. I think maybe there's some name value as well there too. Kansas has had some history, and again, 2 titles. They've snagged one recently as well too, so there's some recency bias. They just won with that 22 team with Abaji and Christian Braun. And all of those schools have had, consistent coaches this entire time with Bill Self. I mean, Coach K up until recently, Calipari up until 2 days ago at Kentucky. And, he was there for, 15 years compared to like Coach K, who was there for 130 years. Roy Williams, who was there for up until recently as well, too. But if Hurley actually stays at UConn and is again building this program, then actually I think and like we're saying, he has that belt. So now I think would actually be, this is really their chance to emerge as that number 1 official program, and not just like, oh, we actually have done it on a number standpoint, but the general public is now acknowledging, oh yeah, UConn is the number 1 blue blood, at least in this like modern era of basketball. And let's just say like things totally change. It's like, okay, regardless of what happened, there was a 30-year span here where UConn was the most dominant blue blood. And that's why I think it would be interesting if Hurley leaves, just if he does take the bag and go, hey, how do I turn down double-digit $1 million? If he consults his sports psychiatrist and his sports psychiatrist like, what are you doing? Take the $10 million, go chase the bag. And he's like, yeah, I guess I got to do it. If that's the move that he makes, it will be interesting to see, one, how UConn goes, is moving forward, but how this era would be remembered for him because of that coaching turnover and not having that one main figure to represent and like be the actual face of the program. I get Calhoun would be that guy, as the main guy that established it, but wouldn't be there for half the national titles as well too. And they would be split between 2 guys. I mean, if you were ranking the 3, would you put Hurley over Calhoun and Kevin? I mean, it's with all love and respect to our guy Kevin Ollie, it's the stacked top 3, but it's probably between Dan Hurley and Calhoun. And those are the multi-time national title guys out of the group as well too. But slide in the DMs, Rem and Sam on Instagram, for who would you guys at this point, if you have to rank the UConn coaches, is it Jim Calhoun 1, Dan Hurley 2, and Kevin Ollie 3, or is it Dan Hurley 1, Jim Calhoun 3, or Jim Calhoun 2, and Kevin Ollie 3? And maybe there's some Kevin Ollie people who want to mix up the list as well too. That would be the debate that I would be having between those 2 guys. But it doesn't seem like we were saying. I think the Kentucky job would probably be a little bit of a step back, because another thing is too, if you're actually able to continue winning over, throughout these coaching changes, there is some higher up culture stuff that's probably even out of my knowledge as well too, in terms of what is in place to actually breed a winner. Because I think just publicly, a lot of the breed a winner, I probably have to pause that, but publicly, there is, a lot of it stops with the coaches. And I mean, that's who's talking in the media as well, to the players and the coaches. And you might see an athletic director every once in a while for, a coach hiring press conference or something like that. But those are the main faces. But there is like the actual other stuff and, boosters and money and funds and all that stuff as well too. But other, cultural stuff that needs to be in place for these programs to continue to be winning cultures. I mean, Alabama has had long runs of success with just a couple of guys, but again, they've been always able to draw the bigger names in college football. And it's a little bit of like the chicken and egg, where you got it's a big name job, so the coaches are going to want to go there, but it's also a big name job because they've had the best coaches to ever do it. So, if Hurley does leave for Kentucky, I would say it's probably I would say like 80-20 at this point. Because again, I think if this is actually like a situation that he really likes, he does seem like a guy that would value situation over any kind of necessarily bigger pay raise. And I think he's going to get the pay raise with UConn, like we're saying. And I think it's just, they raise the base. I'm sure there's going to be incentives that are going to push him over the top and make him the highest paid coach in college basketball. And I guess they were probably, I'm assuming Calhoun was up there in the mix as well, too. Like we're saying, he's coaching against Coach K, Roy Williams. There's other guys that are going to be making bank while he's competing. So I don't know if he would have been able to claim the number one spot, but he was always going to get, probably the maximum dollar that they could give Calhoun at the moment. I guess, again, I don't know. I'm just guessing that would be the case. So I think they're going to take care of Hurley. And I think like Calipari was saying, he felt like he lost support from that Kentucky, just whatever that support system was there. Like we're talking about, whatever the support system is at UConn that has allowed all these coaches to continue to have winning success. Like Calipari felt like he didn't have that there. And I know Calipari has had his moments in this run where I'm sure you could point to him and say, hey, maybe this is the reason that this could have worked out better. But again, I think that UConn situation is good enough for Hurley to stay there. And I think Shannon Sharp made a great point as well, too. When you're looking back at the Pitino and the Tubby Smith days for the Kentucky team, it's not just Calipari where they have a history of these kind of rough endings with coaches. And, those names as well, too, like Pitino, Tubby Smith, Calipari, those guys might run into trouble. And maybe trouble's not the right word, but there might be some clashes between higher ups just outside of Kentucky. Like, Pitino's had his moments at other places, but the Kentucky thing, there is clearly some stuff there where the coach does not feel supported. And if the coach does not feel supported, and if Calipari did not feel supported after, again, being the highest paid guy and feeling like it was time to walk away, and maybe, there's a good chance that Calipari was getting out in front of something as well, too. That is very, very realistic, but it will be interesting to see how desirable that job is. And, it is one of the things maybe they need to find a younger guy and, buy some stock in a younger guy and kind of get the program name back to a place where, hey, maybe the younger guy is the guy that leads the program all the way, or maybe now the program and the brand name is back to a place where you're more attractive to another high level candidate. But when you hear that Coach Calipari is making the move from Arkansas to Kentucky, again, that feels like, with Kentucky being a blue blood school, that feels like you're taking a little bit of a step back from a situational standpoint. But I was curious about that, because especially with the way that Calipari approaches recruiting and approaches his players. I mean, the NIL stuff is going to be very, very important for him, and especially attracting this younger talent and making competitive offers and really putting together attractive packages for these high school candidates. And if you're not just feeling the support for like your job over at Kentucky, but are you feeling the support for the way you actually want to approach constructing your college basketball team? And is your NIL fund going to be aggressive enough and, forward thinking enough with the types of deals that they're putting together for athletes, and putting them with companies where it's not just, hey, it's a good deal now, this could potentially be a good deal 10 years down the road. Like, is he going to get that kind of backing from the boosters to be able to continue to do what he wants to do with that Kentucky program? And I was curious if Arkansas, like what is the money at Arkansas compared to Kentucky? And there was an article by 24/7 Sports, and I think they were also polling. They were taking numbers from another article. So my apologies for not having what that source would be, but it was basically like NIL values for the schools. Like it was the booster ratings for the schools, and it was over a time period as well, too. It's not just like a last year ranking. It was from, I believe, 2005 to 2019. but out of the top 100, out of the top 50 most generous, booster programs, Kentucky ranked 36th and Arkansas ranked 33rd. So, their Arkansas is only a little bit ahead of them, but Arkansas being ahead of them was a little bit surprising. You got Kentucky at 306 million and Arkansas at 324 million. And there was another article by On3 Sports that was it was labeled the most ambitious NIL collectives. So it wasn't just like all of the collectives making up the number for the whole school. So like the last number I read out was the booster amount for the whole schools, but this was just like the individual collectives within the schools, which ones were what they called the most ambitious. And Arkansas had a collective called One Arkansas NIL, and it ranked 8th on this list. And Kentucky did not have a collective on the list. And if you look at some of the alumni that Arkansas has, I mean, Jerry Jones is an Arkansas alumni. You've got a bunch of Walmart people. I mean, the Walmart headquarters is in Arkansas, and I think the Walmart main founder, the OG Walmart guy, I don't believe he's an Arkansas guy, but I think some of the brothers and people with the Walmart money are Arkansas alumni. The current Walmart CEO, I believe, is also a Walmart alumni. And then there was a guy that his name was being floated around a lot in these Coach Calipari talks, John H. Tyson, who is the Tyson Foods guy, another like mega billionaire. Apparently him and Calipari are golf buddies, or at least were golf buddies to get this deal done. But that was apparently that connection between Calipari and Tyson was a big reason about why Calipari, or at least one of the reasons why Calipari chose to make the move over to Arkansas. Not just make a move, but I think to make a move specifically to that program. And if Tyson alone with $1 billion is probably able to do quite a bit of work on the NIL scene. So if you have a guy that again is like, I agree with your vision for building a program, and maybe he's going, if we win a national title once every 15 years, maybe it is what it is. But Arkansas, they're kind of in that spot anyways. I think their last title that they won was in the 90s. And that Arkansas team, shout out the Corliss Williams, or is it Corliss Williamson? Arkansas team. That was a fun team. Yeah, Corliss Williamson, Corey Beck, Scotty Thurman, 15 points a game that year, 16 points a game that year, beat Duke. Was that was a post Christian Laettner. Grant Hill is a senior. No, Bobby Hurley as well too. So Grant Hill, his buddies left him alone a little bit there, but still able to take a team to the national title. Unfortunately, Corliss Williams was unstoppable that year. But if Calipari's got these big financial guys saying, hey, we agree with what you're doing and we're willing to be aggressive, ambitious in spending that kind of way and doing that kind of thing, then yeah, it makes sense why Calipari would make the move. Again, the salary is, I think, going to be pretty similar to what he was getting at Kentucky. And in the NIL era, how much does a school name brand value matter anyways right now? Like, how much does that actually matter right now? And how much does that just matter in general? Because I think programs are mostly tied to people, if we're being honest. Like Duke, when you think about Duke, you think about Coach K, you think, North Carolina has had a couple of historic guys with Dean Smith and Roy Williams, Villanova, Jay Wright. But, I think the coach name value is almost more important than the school name value. And in the NIL era, where it becomes, a job market more so than, it was a different thing even 10 years ago, 15, and, especially even going back to the Corliss Williamson teams, but, trying to put yourself in a position to become a pro and realizing that, the money is not now. I got to set myself up to get the money in the future. But now that college basketball is about getting the money now, being like, hey, being at Kentucky, I get that cachet. Kentucky is a place where Coach Calipari, this is a place that is known for these number one recruits. If I play well here, I'm definitely going to get that look and get that boost. And, maybe again, that's not a Kentucky thing. If Arkansas is going to offer you the same money and you're going, hey, it's Coach Calipari, it's, I'm going to get the same sort of look. I don't know if Arkansas is going to be at a disadvantage because they're not necessarily a blue blood school in that sense. And, Coach Calipari himself as well, too. Like, Arkansas is going to be really good with Coach Calipari. That's the thing. And I know the Kentucky thing in the tournament hasn't worked out, but like we talked about, the regular season, this has been a good team. I think a couple of years ago, the 2019 team was like a 9-win team. He had a stinker in there. It is what it is. But they were 12th in the AP poll this year. They were unranked last year, a 6th seed going into the tournament, 22-12. Lost but that was the year they actually got the tournament win. 7th in the AP poll in the 21-22 season. That's the Ty Washington Oscar Sheboy team that lost to St. Petersburg. Again, 7th in the AP poll. Then they had the 9-win team. And then really that 9-win team it was COVID. Something happened over COVID with Kentucky and Coach Cal that really changed, something at that program, some jinx got happened because going back, like before that, they were making deep tournament runs. I mean, let's go back to the 16-17 team. That's the Malik Monk, De'Aaron Fox, Bam Adebayo team. They lose on that game-winning shot to Luke May in the Elite Eight, lose that game by 2 points. That was a top 5 team in the AP poll. The Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Kevin Knox team, they lose that K-State game in the Sweet 16 was a 2-point game that year, and that team was super talented as well. And then he has the Keldon Johnson, Tyler Hero, TJ Washington returning as a sophomore, Emmanuel Quickly as a freshman on the team, getting some bench minutes, but it's mainly Johnson and Hero. And they lost to Auburn in the Elite Eight again, another 6-point loss. So there's definitely some Coach Calipari close game stuff. I get it when you're reading out that he's losing all these close games, but then they had the COVID season in the 1920 season, and that year they were 8th in the AP poll when the sports world got shut down. And that was Emmanuel Quickly as a sophomore, Nick Richards as a junior, Tyrese Maxey as a freshman. We never got to see what he would do in March Madness. Johnny Juzang as a freshman on the bench, and then I believe he transfers away after that. And then he has the Brandon Boston, Isaiah Jackson team that wins 9 games. And then, the recent tournament history that we're all aware of where he has the 1 win and all the early exits. But again, the teams have been competitive for the most part. The recruiting's been there in place. And he's all, go back to Memphis, go back to UMass, Marcus Camby. I think so. He's been in the national title with all the teams he's coached, right? Was he in the national title with UMass? Because he was in the national title with Derrick Rose, and they lost to Kansas, obviously. But I want to say they lost the national. Oh, no, they lost in the Final Four that year. They were number 1 in the AP poll. Must have been 35-1 going into the tournament. Oh, there's been some adjusted record stuff that has happened to that team, but lost in the Final Four to Rick Pitino in Kentucky. Tony Delk, Antoine Walker, Walter McCarthy, Derek Anderson, Ron Mercer. A lot of NBA talent on this team. Understandable. And this was the national champion as well, too. So maybe that was technically the national championship game between those two teams. But been to the Final Four with all the teams he's coached. So I don't know. Do we want a hot take? Calipari would be in the Final Four. I don't know how much Arkansas Calipari stock we want to buy, but he's going to make that program a really competitive program. And I would say, maybe the take for the short term would be that they're going to get more wins than Kentucky, something along those lines, that they'll be better than Kentucky recently. Because again, with the rumblings about how Calipari was treated, I think in coaching circles, I think that will matter. Now there will be a guy that says, yeah, I need the Kentucky job is, this is a match made in heaven. This is exactly what I'm looking for. But, are they going to be able to go get Nate Oates? Again, Dan Hurley is obviously the main number 1 guy right now, but I think if we're talking not Dan Hurley, I think Nate Oates would be the other guy that if you're a blue blood school, does our name brand attract you enough to come coach at our program? Duke seems pretty fine with John Shire right now, but let's like just say that Duke had an opening for some reason at that coaching position. Like I think Nate Oates is probably outside of, I get Dan Hurley. Okay, again, it's the first call, but my guess would be Nate Oates would be the second call. I don't know. Maybe there's some other Duke alumni. Do they call Grant Hill? Like is there some other Duke connection thing that the Duke fans are mad that I'm not pointing out? But like I don't know if they're going to be able to. I know there's like Chris Beard as another big name that's floating around right now. I'm just, also I don't know if I've seen like Brad Underwood's name floated around, but that's another guy at Illinois. Is the Kentucky job considered a step up? Let's pull up the AP poll from this season and see what the main schools are, because Underwood could be an interesting one as well too. I mean, Purdue just made the national title. Do we go Matt Painter? Would the Kentucky fans be happy about Matt Painter getting the job? Kelvin Sampson from Houston. Would he leave the Houston spot? Is it Oldsberger? TJ Oldsberger for Iowa State. Maybe that's another interesting guy. But a lot of the other name too, like Nate Oates already said that he was pretty committed to his team. So we'll just be curious to see how attractive that Kentucky job becomes in the future. But again, shout out to UConn, shout out to South Carolina for their incredible runs this year. I think, do we just say it's a tie and say they both had equally good runs? I don't know. Just the Dawn Staley thing, finding out that she coached and played in the WNBA thing really is like, whoa, okay, this is that's like a whole. Obviously, I knew that Dawn Staley was a great basketball figure, but that is incredible. And like Sam was saying too, doing the recruiting as well. She's kind of like, the way people have been talking about her as of right now, it's kind of like what the best case scenario is for Deion Sanders, right? If he, with just the aura, especially too, of, if he was able to ascend to a level where he would be this dominant on the college football scale, that kind of feels like best case scenario for Deion Sanders right now is to do what Dawn Staley has done for this South Carolina team. But again, incredible season from both ways. Incredible that we actually got the records breaking, the viewership numbers, the fact that, like we were saying, time and time again, the star players were able to step up and rise to the occasion was just fantastic. Honestly, I'm kind of back in. I apologize to college basketball. I think I might have said it when I filled out the bracket, but I apologize. I'm back in on college basketball. It was fantastic. Again, I don't know what this new transfer portal NIL stuff is going to do to all the logistics and the financials. And, there are going to be schools and there's change and all that. Yeah, I get it. But the talent was great. There was a ton of players that I really enjoyed watching this year. Again, I know we mentioned it with Allie, but that Alabama team was one of the most fun I've had. Every couple of years, there's just like another team outside of Michigan that'll, we all have our mistress teams that we look at from time to time. And this Alabama team is going to go down for me as definitely a mistress team of the tournament that I had a lot of fun cheering for. Sears was incredible this whole tournament run. Let me pull up his numbers. That guy is a guy that I have marked down on my draft boards. I have not seen him. I have not seen what this tournament run will do to his draft stock yet. I've been trying to look at some of the draft boards and see where his name is falling. But like on Tankathon right now, Mark Sears is not on their list of player options. And his name was in the draft last year and he withdrawed, went back to school. And I mean, Alabama is, after this tournament run, extremely grateful that he returned for the tournament this year, taking his team to the Final Four, 5 games played. He was 24 points a game, 53% from the field, 45% from 3, and 82% from the free throw line, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, stealing a half a game. Had a pretty good performance as well, too, against UConn. Was like the one guy that played well against UConn this whole tournament. And took 14 shots in the game. That was another thing about him too. He was, again, with the high percentages, he was not like a super aggressive scorer, but really picked his spots, hit big. I mean, 45% from three. Like, he hit every big three. He needed to hit basically the entire run. And I mean, is there like, okay, if Mark Sears takes 20 shots against UConn and just tries to power the team back and throw the team on his back and, try to pull out the win, like, I get that that's a potential timeline that could have happened, but I thought he played extremely well this season. And again, if we're talking NBA draft, so right now on Sports Reference, they have him listed at 6'1", 185 on Sports Reference. Let's see what they had Brunson listed at for college, because Brunson, they had him at 6'3", 199. So they have Brunson at 6'3" feels, he's 6'3". Brunson, call in. Is that with shoes? 199. I mean, shout out Brunson. He's shout out Brunson for being thick. But Mark Sears feels a little Brunson-y with his game. I think the pace too is just how he runs, like the pick and roll stuff too, the 3-point shooting. I think the Spurs have 2 second-round picks this year, so I know we need some point guard help. I think that could be a guy that, at worst case scenario, that's a great second unit option for some team out there. Again, I haven't seen his name start to climb up draft boards yet, but Mark Sears is gonna be my guy. Who was it? Our Amani Bailey that we had too high on our draft board last year. I still haven't given up on Maxwell Lewis. Somebody needs to free Maxwell Lewis, or the Lakers just need to play him a little bit more. But we're definitely going to rank Mark Sears too high on our draft boards as well too. Grant Nelson, like I said, that whole Alabama team was awesome. Clingan as well too for UConn. And when I was filling out the bracket and I was curious about whether or not UConn could actually do the tournament run, Clingan was the guy where it's like, this is the guy that needs to really go to like I don't want to say like Patrick Ewing level, but defensively for this tournament, I mean, he was incredible. To me, he was the best. He's the most intimidating defensive player that I've seen since Willie Cauley-Stein. And then probably Willie Cauley-Stein that would be the line. It'd be Anthony Davis to Willie Cauley-Stein to Donovan Clingan for college basketball, the big man. And, the Willie Cauley-Stein Kentucky team, they made a Final Four run as well, too. And that's the other team from a regular season standpoint that I always go back to when we're talking dominant teams. And, when we're like, when teams are like, when people are trying to pick the number 1 overall team to win the bracket, that Willie Cauley-Stein Kentucky team is always the team that I think about. That's like, I can't do it, because if that Willie Cauley-Stein Kentucky team couldn't do it, then I don't know who can. But hey, maybe that's I think the three winningest college basketball teams of all time are, in terms of most wins in a season, have all been coached by Coach Calipari. And I don't know if any of those teams have won the national title. They're the Anthony Davis team is, I think, like top 5, top 7, and they won the national title, obviously. But I know he's got like 2 Kentucky teams, and there's one of those UMass Memphis teams for single season. The 14-15 team was the most wins. So that was, that Willie Cauley-Stein team. That was the Devin Booker, Karl Anthony Towns, 38 wins, and they lost in the Final Four to Wisconsin that year. And then 38 wins in the 11-12 Kentucky season. So that was the Anthony Davis season, the year they won the national title. So, okay. 2 of and then the Memphis season with Derrick Rose, also 38 wins. So I get the top 3, but the tied for the number 1 with 38 wins. He did manage to win the national title. And then this UConn team right here with 37 wins, Dan Hurley tied for number 2. Mark Few's 2016-17 Gonzaga team, Bill Self's 2008 Kansas team that won the national title, Illinois in 04-05 that lost in the national title to North Carolina. You got 99 Duke. They lost in the national title to UConn. And then UNLV that lost to, Final Four to Indiana. And then Duke in 85-86 that lost the national final to Louisville that year. So of the 37 win teams, only Kansas and this UConn team are the only teams to win the national title. And then you got 36 win Villanova team that won the national title as well too. So I mean, we're going down the list at this point, but Clingan, I was ready to kind of be if he makes a run here, he's a guy that we have to reconsider from a draft standpoint as like a top level, not just a lottery pick, but like top 10. I don't know. He might be like top 7, top 8 at this point. And it's definitely happened. Yeah. Tankathon right now has him 7 to Memphis. So, Clingan and Jaren Jackson as a backcourt, as a defensive duo there. Clingan as the Steven Adams replacement for Memphis. Interesting fit. I kind of like it. They also got Stephen Castle going number 6 to Toronto. If Toronto and Memphis could just flip spots, and then maybe that's Clingan going to San Antonio. Or do the Grizzlies just take him at 6? Or do they take Castle? Do they just want the size, or are they just going for the winning culture? I don't know. Castle there with maybe him and Bane. I don't know. Maybe Bane could play like a little bit of the 3. Castle might need to bulk up a little bit more if they're going to run Ja Morant and Castle and Bane out there all together. So maybe Clingan is the pick. But like I said, the draft community is definitely rallying around this guy. He was super impressive. Again, the defense, he seems like he is going to be a stud at the center position. And I think it's a little bit different too. The expectations for his type of player compared to even like when Willie Cauley-Stein was in the draft, because he was like, Willie Cauley-Stein was also a top 7 pick to the Sacramento Kings. And I think there was just a different expectation of what that kind of centerpiece could be, because that's not too long after the Dwight Howard Magic run as well too. So there's like if we have the defensive center guy with the shot blocking and the spacing, and we can throw him lobs and do the pick and roll, like that actual center, that guy is actually the centerpiece of the team. And then did it kind of flip with Harden then? At that point, you go, okay, is now the guard. I mean, not that Harden flipped it to the guard being the centerpiece of the pick and roll, but in the spacing era, there was a moment there where it was like, okay, we're doing this because we want, again, that like big shot blocker guy and all the shooters around him. And I think it was like, can Willie Cauley-Stein be that? And I think Clingan, again, we understand. I call him the Steven Adams replacement, and Steven Adams was, if we were maybe like the 4th best guy on a given night for the Grizzlies. So I'm saying this guy could be a valuable addition, but I think with proper expectations, I think we could be ready for, Willie Cauley-Stein too. The NBA numbers, like shout out, he got his bag as well too. But I think there's an understanding of what Clingan could be in the NBA at that spot in the draft now, with especially all the ball handling and with the type of big that he is. Because we understand there's like the 2 types of bigs. There's like the unicorny type big, and then there's that big that, again, is in that shot blocking type vein. And I don't know, is Clingan like, I don't know if he is Al Horford-y, but Al Horford was the last, again, big centerpiece guy to do the back-to-back national title run. And Horford was probably a little crisper in his post-ups and better pass. I mean, they would actually put Horford, like they do in the NBA, but Horford at the top of the key, run offense around him. And, they were doing that a little bit with Clingan as well, too. Clingan was posting up. Like, again, he's doing all the stuff, but Horford was a little bit more polished of an offensive player. Clingan probably a better defensive player, but he's not Leitner, obviously. The Leitner really much better footwork. Maybe in college, probably the best offensive player of the 3 guys, but of the back-to-back bigs, is he Sidney Wicks? Kareem, probably not going back that far, but I don't know if they don't have comparisons on Tankathon, but maybe we'll do a little research, get a comp for Clingan and come back. But there was one other thing that I wanted to mention without Sam here, because when Sam's not here, this is our chance to talk about UFC. And make no mistake, we will be we'll be reacting to UFC 300 next week, because it's this weekend. So next week we'll be reacting to it. But I don't know, do we need to shout out BetStamp real quick? Shout out BetStamp. Let's see if we can pull up some odds for this upcoming match, UFC 300. I'm super excited. It's been a little bit of a break here for the UFC cards, but I mean, this is, and it, this is 300. They wanted to really have a big event, obviously, for an anniversary event. And I'm not going to lie, they might have overdone it. This card might be a little bit too stacked. Like the prelim fight, because they got, the main card, the prelim, and then the early prelims. I think Jalen Turner is fighting in the early prelims. Jalen Turner's like a top 5 favorite fighter for me, and I can't even watch it because I don't got the fight pass. UFC, I can't. You want me to get the fight pass and ESPN Plus and buy the pay-per-view? I think the only guy that can afford this is Rogan, and he probably gets it for free. So I mean, just don't overstack the card with putting Jalen Turner on the prelims. He might be like the first fight of the day too, which I mean, starting off with a bang. But favored right now, the best odds are -225 for Jalen Turner. And there's odds ranging from -250 to -225. So again, that's why BetStamp is important, because I know these seem like little advantages, but I mean, anybody knows that any kind of like market related financial stuff, I mean, it's the little advantages and then over time, collecting those little advantages. And comparing sports gambling to the market, is it not too far off? But like we said, Jalen Turner, kind of a heavy favorite right now. So if I'm being honest, in my heart of hearts, it's a little bit scary, but that's my boy. So I would definitely back the pick. And if you wanted to start looking, let's see if our friends over at DRF have any of like the round or the TKO submission props yet for the fighting. Because I know it's on some of the other sports books at this point, but shout out to our friends over at DRF. If you guys are in, like we said, the home state, the state of Iowa, it's just a little hookup that we have. Links in the description. If you guys need a really just, if a good solid place to find the best odds for all of the sporting events, your friends over at DRF is the place to be. So they've also got Jalen Turner favored to win, of course, but none of the as of this point, like we said, it's Tuesday night. It's a little bit early in the week to be doing some of the specific props, but all of the money line bets are out at this point. So we'll like we said, shout out DRF. We'll definitely stay tuned and be looking, but let's just see where some of the props right now on the market stand at this point, because I think maybe could we make a little bit of money with Jalen Turner. The thing is, he's a little bit of a submission guy as well, too. So he could always throw that in. You could get a round prop. Jalen Turner in round 3, 9-1 is not bad. Any of those, I mean, plus 170 to win in round 1. I mean, again, he's a heavy favorite. So maybe plus 430 round 2, early or late round 2. Method of victory, Jalen Turner by submission, plus 750. Jalen Turner by TKO, minus 115. So I guess if you go method combo, plus 220 for Jalen Turner TKO in the first round, not bad. Not bad. We'll stay tuned to the Rem and Sam Instagram, and maybe we'll throw something up in the stories for more specific props. There was one for the Oliveira fight that I was really looking at. The Oliveira fight to go the distance right now is plus odds as well, too. Oliveira is the underdog at plus 176. But the fight to go the distance right now, plus 215. It's a 3-round fight. So if this was a 5-round fight, it's a little bit different, but it's so quick. So maybe it's, the guys are going to be super locked in and super intense, and the fact that they don't have to pace, they can pace themselves a little bit differently. Maybe, that's why it's 2-1. But I think two high-level fighters, can they finish each other paws in 3 rounds? I think 2-1 is good value on that. If I think Oliveira could beat him in points. Let's see what Oliveira by points is right now. That's 8-1. So if we're thinking specifically Oliveira by points, that would be interesting. But the fight to go the distance gives us a little bit of a leeway. If again, Oliveira is a former champion And if the favorite right now was able to do as projected, I think a former champion standing his ground for 3 rounds could make a lot of sense. So 2-1 seems like a good bet for that. Same with the Gaethje Holloway fight. That fight is also, oh no, that fight is minus 106 to go the distance. So you can get Holloway at plus 144 right now on this other sports book. Let's see what the best odds are. Let's see. This is why you have BetStamp. You just go over and check BetStamp and see if we're getting the best odds at plus 144. Now, see, there's another sports book out there that has Holloway at plus 150. So just a little bit of an advantage. DRF is not the one slacking at this case. Like we said, when DRF puts out the props this weekend, they will all be the best ones on the market. But, I mean, and you can only get those if you guys are located in Iowa because it's only available in the state of Iowa. I don't know if there's any other legal speak that we need to do, but they will be the best on the market. And if you need to get an advantage in the other books, BetStamp is the place to do it. The other interesting one is Bo Nickel is like a minus 2,000 right now to win. So I'm not saying bet the guy at 12-1 to beat Bo Nickel. I mean, Bo Nickel is an absolute stud, but let's see what some of the more specific props are for this one. To go the distance, 6-1, round betting. Bo Nickel in the 3rd round, 14-1. I mean, that's not bad right there. That's better than betting the guy to win. Is this guy? This guy Bo Nickel he has a better chance of beating Bo Nickel than he does of lasting till the 3rd round against Bo Nickel. If I'm reading that correctly, I guess he's 10-1 to win right now, 14-1 to go to the 3rd round. But that could be interesting. Just there, when the odds are that dramatic, it feels like you have to go against it in a little bit of a way. But I'm not saying, again, fully outright pick the guy to beat Bo Nickel. But what's a method combo? Submission, Bo Nickel by submission in the 3rd, plus 2,400, 24-1, 8-1 submission in the 2nd, 10-1 TKO in the 2nd. So I get, if maybe he gets him around earlier than the 3rd, but if you're feeling like Bo Nickel's going to knock this guy out, I feel like we might go like a 2nd round method bet with the Bo Nickel one on this. I think that might be the way to go. And definitely, like we're saying, mark down that Oliveira, go the distance. The fact that that's my number 1 bet means that fight will definitely not. So go against it, but keeping my eye on that one at 2-1. And Pereira is going to be a sick watch against Jamal Hill. Because if he beats him and Yuri back to back and cleans up the lightweight division the way he has, there is really, I mean, the fact that he is the main fighter on the biggest UFC card. Well, I mean, I think calling it the biggest UFC card is correct, but just from a stacked value, I get, it's not like John Jones is fighting on the card, but I think him being the face of that card obviously says that he's probably the face of the UFC at this point. Again, John Jones is hurt right now, so anytime John Jones is fighting, that's probably the number 1 guy until anybody says differently. But Pereira could really claim his spot as a legend in this game if he carries a legendary performance in this card. And there was a one other event as well too that I was looking forward to seeing. Oh yeah, Yuri was fighting as well too. Yuri is minus 104 right now to win. His opponent, Alivander Rakic, Rakic, minus 122. So both, if Yuri's shins are doing okay after the leg kicks from Pereira, but I mean the round betting, the round betting is just the way to go with these fights. Yuri round 1 plus 470, plus 650 in round 2, or plus 850 in round 3. Let's see what go the distance. Go the distance is plus 162. Can we parlay both the Yuri and the Oliveira fight to go the distance? Is that are the fighting people screaming at me like, no, obviously somebody's gonna win in both of those fights? I mean, I get it, but I just don't think Oliveira gets finished. He gets, paused. He gets TKO'd or something. Would be traumatic. But if we parlay these together, 7-1 to get both of these. Maybe day of there's a boost that maybe one of the books is doing a promotion. You guys can boost the odds a little bit. If DRF wants to do a boost for the UFC fight, just call in and we'll work something out together. But we'll definitely be looking forward to that. Should I do picks real quick? Let me get the list back up here and do picks. I think I would pick Pereira to beat Hill. I would pick. I don't know if it's always tough to do picks for fights, but be interested to see what Yuri's going to do. And like we said, we're always cheering for a guy, Jalen Turner, Olivier, the former champ. I don't know if I'm ready to see him have a losing streak at this point in the year. And the Gaethje Holloway fight is just a couple of UFC legends. Is that a BMF belt fight? I mean, it might as well be. I think it's a 5-rounder for something. But that is it for this week's episode. Like we said, stay tuned to the feed. Rem and Sam podcast, Rem and Sam on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Uber. Like, we are out there on any social media any app that you guys can think of. We are going to be on there at Rem and Sam platform. So we will be back this weekend with Sam. Like always, stay tuned. Thank you guys for listening. Have a good night.